We've got another big day coming up for Palantir, with them about to report their Q1 2024 earnings Monday, May 6th after the bell. I want to talk about some stuff that I'm looking for inside this report just as a check-in, okay? I'm super excited to get into this, but if you're new here, real quick, I'm Austin. I'm a co-owner of cloudmusicsuite.com. I'm also a stock market investor, and most importantly for this specific video, I'm a Palantir shareholder. I've been a Palantir shareholder for quite a while now, multiple years. I'm up very nicely on my shares, and it's a very large position for me, so I'll definitely be watching these earnings very closely. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and become one of those 3,500 or so people, and do me a favor and tap the like. It means a lot and it helps out the channel. Before we get into the three main things I'll be looking for in the earnings report, I just want to chat about Palantir's history over the last year and year to date. The stock price specifically is up over 200% on a 1 year span, and year to date the stock's up 40%. Those are extremely good gains that people have gotten on their shares, and it's important to realize why that's happened. Not only has Palantir continued to flesh out their business model and grow their revenues substantially quarter in and quarter out, but more importantly than that, they have flipped to profitability and consistent and growing profitability on the bottom line on a GAAP basis. Every single quarter for the past 5 quarters, they've been EPS positive on a GAAP basis, and 4 in a row have been income from operations positive on a GAAP basis. That's the massive corner that Palantir flipped to prove to the market that they are the real deal, that they are going to be this beastly high margin software company that's a total profit beast. They're proving that they can run the business well enough to not be a cash burner. A lot of the bear cases around Palantir are just falling away one by one by one, and it is due to how the management team is running the business. They're doing an absolutely amazing job. In order for the stock to keep on running and keep on gaining inside of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, they got to keep putting up very impressive profit numbers and growing those profit numbers massively while the revenue increases, while they keep the spending under control, and while they keep coming out with new and innovative products. Palantir's fundamentals have gotten insanely better over the last 18 months, and I only see them doubling down on that and improving them even more, putting the balance sheet in an even stronger spot quarter in, quarter out, putting profitability in a stronger spot quarter in, quarter out, putting free cash flow in a better spot, etc. And for those reasons, that's why I think Palantir is going to continue to perform well in its stock price. Because the fundamentals are strong, the stock price is going to be strong. Because the earnings are strong, the stock price is going to be strong. We know that stocks follow earnings in the long term. If Palantir is able to keep on becoming more and more profitable and bring in more earnings onto that bottom line, the stock price is going to get more and more love over time, and we're going to get a nice appreciation over the long term. What happens in the short term to the stock price really changes nothing about what I'm going to be doing with the stock. Of course, if it drops in a crazy massive way, I'll be a big time buyer. But aside from that, it's really not going to change anything about what I'm doing with Palantir. So things that I fully expect to see that I think are almost guaranteed is another EPS positive quarter on a GAAP basis, another income from operations positive quarter on a GAAP basis, another free cash flow beast quarter, and revenue increasing by at or near 20%. But now let's get into those 3 main things I'll be really looking for in the earnings report, okay? Number 1, I want to see customer count accelerating, specifically on the commercial side. Last quarter, they clocked 70% year over year US commercial growth, and then 55% US customer count growth. I want to see that US commercial growth still staying very high. For it to stay at a 70% number, I think is a little bit unrealistic, but for it to be somewhere between 30 and 50%, I think is reasonable, and I think we're going to see that in Q1 of 2024. And even more important than that, US commercial customer count is what I'm really going to be looking at. So they had 221 US commercial customers at the end of Q4 of 2023. With these boot camps they've been doing, I want to see that those are actually beneficial for Palantir to bring on new customers. That's the idea of these boot camps, is to bring on more new commercial customers in a much shorter amount of time. I think that can work if they execute it well. I just want proof that it's going to work quarter in and quarter out, and it wasn't just Q4 of 2023. 2023 that they had that crazy explosion in US commercial customer count. The second big thing I'm going to be looking for is actually a revenue guidance raise. I really want to see that Palantir was actually sandbagging their numbers whenever they gave their guidance at the beginning of the year. A lot of tech companies, a lot of high growth companies sandbagged their numbers for 2024 because they thought that 2024 potentially could be a really bad and rough economic year. So they sandbagged those numbers. They said, hey, we're going to grow 20% when really they know that they're able to grow 22, 23, 24, 25%. I'm hoping that Palantir did that as well. I think sandbagging numbers a little bit can be a good thing so that every single quarter you can come in and beat analyst expectations, not only on revenue, but also on EPS and on free cash flow, etc. So I'd like to see a Q2 or even a fiscal 24 revenue raise on the guidance side inside of this Q1 earnings report. That's another thing I'm going to be looking for to see if they are a company that's sandbagging numbers a little bit so that they can play Wall Street's game and come in and beat those numbers every single time. That can be very good for a stock price. And then the third thing I'm going to be looking for is actually any conversation or news around their share buyback authorization. If you didn't know, they authorized their first ever share buyback of $1 billion. And we know that Palantir did not buy back any shares. They didn't use any of that $1 billion in the repurchase allowance inside of 2023. We're just not sure if they used any of that inside of Q1 of 2024. I doubt that they used any, but if they did, I would like to know that. We know Palantir's balance sheet is absolutely ridiculous. They have an insane amount of cash on hand, tons of short-term assets. They could very easily do this $1 billion buyback and still be in an extremely strong balance sheet position. So I'm not worried about it putting their balance sheet in a worse spot. It's not like they're doing what Apple's doing where they're holding tons of debt on the balance sheet and still doing these buybacks. It's not a situation like that at all. So if they choose to do the buyback, I'm all for it because it can help those EPS numbers a lot. If you ever look at an earnings report and you see that net income increased by 10% for the quarter, but EPS increased by 12 or 13 or 14% for the quarter, what is responsible for that is those share buybacks, okay? So this can make EPS expand even faster than net income is expanding. And as we know, stocks follow earnings over the long term. So if those earnings are going up and those EPS numbers are looking even better quarter in and quarter out because of something like a share buyback, and of course, because they're becoming more profitable, that can help the stock price over the medium term and over the long term. I'm curious if they're expanding the buyback program. I'm curious if they've spent any amount of money on buying back shares. Overall, buybacks are generally a good thing for overall shareholder return, assuming they're not hurting the company's ability to invest back into the business, into research and development, into building new products, into marketing, etc. So as long as it's not hurting investment back into the business, I'm okay with a share buyback. Of course, I would like for a company to buy back their shares when the stock is undervalued rather than fair valued or overvalued. Palantir's valuation has been pushed quite a lot. For them to be buying back shares right now, I don't think is the best decision. For them to keep that buyback authorization ready, that $1 billion ready, and if the stock dips in any meaningful way, for them to go pick up those shares at a discount would be a lot wiser than them picking up the shares at these steeper valuations. I think the valuation is a little bit stretched, which means they have to have a pretty dang good earnings in order to keep the wind in the sails of Palantir and move it up in any substantial way. I think it's totally possible that they have an absolutely beastly quarter, specifically on the US commercial revenue growth side, US commercial customer count growth, revenue growth, EPS, and free cash flow. I think those 5 things could be hugely positive for the company in Q1 2024, and I think government revenue is going to be a lot better than it has been in the past few quarters, just based off how many government contracts have been announced over the last little while. It all depends on how they get the funding for that and when they get the funding for that as to when that hits the revenue numbers, but a lot of new government deals have been announced, and some of them were pretty substantial amounts. So I think the revenue growth numbers on the government side could be very strong as well. I see another strong quarter for Palantir in Q1. I'm extremely bullish on Palantir. I've got a very large position. It's a top 3 holding for me. A really nice gain on my shares because Palantir's been very nice to me. And I'm looking forward to this quarter. Let me know what you're doing with Palantir. Are you still buying? Are you just holding? Are you selling? Are you doing any options plays? I want to know what you're doing with Palantir. I appreciate you being here in a major way. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day.